The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Great to have you in. Midweek editions here at Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency for all your equipment financing needs. Go Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark is in. And we're loaded up today. Mike Babcock, Mike Schuchart this hour. Plenty of Aaron Rodgers thoughts, Husker baseball reaction, spring football looms. So we'll get there, and more NFL and college football in hour two. The sporting news is Bill Bender going to join us. Evan Bland on hand last night with the World Herald to watch Nebraska's debacle on the diamond, and then a Jock Doc to wind us up. Numbers to get in can join us today here on Hail Varsity Radio, 489-1240, 489-1240. Can call that, or across the state where you hear us, 1-800-825-5865. 800-825-5865. Can email Chris at hailvarsity.com. And always encouraged to check the show out live on video. Don't even have to rent it, man. It's just right there for you. The Hail Varsity YouTube channel, the Hail Varsity Radio Twitter handle at HVarsity Radio. Give that a follow. KFOR Facebook and Twitter as well. Give us a find on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, at Herbal Essence, and at C_Clark_27. That's how you get it done. Fellas, how we doing today? Kind of a highly anticipated 1 o'clock announcement with Mr. Pat McAfee and Aaron Rodgers. It's Jets, Jets. I know two Jets fans in my life, but I'm happy for them. Nebraska football is still on our mind as we talked quite a bit of the storylines. We'll get to some of those that are intriguing to us, and we'll spend time with Mike Babcock on that. But guys, I want to start with Husker baseball. And Connor, you've done a lot of ball games for college and BTN Plus, so you see a lot of Nebraska baseball. I keep my ear to it as much as possible as well. Elijah, you're an ump, and you love baseball yourself. And right now, what are you feeling as a Nebraskan about this baseball team? And I don't want to be hot take, overreaction, crucify guy. I don't. And I understand that there is Nebraska baseball seen a certain way, and Nebraska's baseball seen a certain way by Nebraska baseball. Right? There's this hierarchy where Nebraska baseball is it in the state. Creighton will have something to say about that here on Tuesday. And UNO absolutely had something to say about it last night. And I love these games being scheduled, because if you're Nebraska and you're as good as you think you are because of the name on the front of your jersey and the red N, you got to prove it against teams and kids that you grew up playing against that are pissed, not necessarily, but there's a chip that they're not on Nebraska. And guess what? You better fight like it is late June in Omaha every time you get out on the field against Creighton or UNO. Kudos to UNO last night for finding ways, making big pitches, big hits, hunkering down and coming back. And if you're Nebraska and you're Will Bolt, you want to go Earl Weaver, for lack of a better reference, because you're probably just screaming at your kids. You're just not happy with the consistency. And it's your big dogs that aren't doing their job in some key moments in these games. It's not the end of the world. It's one game. But, man, it's several steps back after what you just did in Minneapolis.
Well, what made that Husker
baseball
team?
Am I overreacting to one game?
No, I think there is the factor that this is one game, but I think
maybe
one game though can show some cracks within a team. And that if you go back to that team of 2 years ago, the team that gave Arkansas all they could handle in the regional, that team wouldn't have dropped a game to UNO like that, like the way it was last night.
They want to go out and dominate every time.
It's the gritty over pretty aspect. You know what happens whenever it's the fifth inning and you're starting to lose a bit of control, your pitching isn't there? That team's going to come together and they're going to fight like hell through the later innings to go win that baseball game because it's gritty over pretty. We didn't see that last night. We've seen some gritty performances from this Husker baseball team. We saw it against Vanderbilt, but if you're not going to get up for a Tuesday game against UNO, and I know that's not the sexiest game in the world. It's not Ole Miss. It's not Vandy. It's not going down south and playing in San Diego. Yeah,
they all count.
Yes, but you're playing a cold game at home against UNO, who not even Power 5. You look at them and you go, okay, let's just get through this one and make it to the weekend. You can't have that mentality in baseball, especially in the Big Ten. You know what? If you drop a game like that in the Big 12, it can mean a little bit less, but you get to the end of the season, sometimes it's pretty competitive to get that invite to a regional. And I don't want to say one game is going to be the factor there, but that's going to be in the committee's decision-making process. Whenever you say, you know what, Nebraska lost a couple of midweek games to teams they really shouldn't have lost to, and we're going to give the edge to the team that went and won those games and performed all year long. So I think it just, without trying to overreact, as you said, I'm not trying to overreact. I think it's baseball. It's one game. It happens. Sometimes the best team in the MLB loses one game to the worst team in the MLB. The Orioles won 20 games that one year, and they're still winning baseball games. Like, it happens. In baseball, it happens. You're just going to lose baseball games. But with that being said,
the Earl Weaver track going.
Yeah. With that being said, though, you look at that performance last night and you just go, is this team going to be able to lock in for the rest of the season? Because that's what you need in the Big Ten. You need to be a team that's going to be locked in, game out. And whenever you lose games, it's because, you know what, starter didn't have it tonight. Or you know what, that other team was just hitting the lights out of the ball. They were seeing the ball well. It happens in baseball. It can't be because you weren't locked in. And last night, what I saw was a baseball team that wasn't locked in with the bullpen and with the defense.
Look, it's one game, and I know it could mean something down the road.
Does it keep you from hosting a regional?
Probably not, because you probably aren't going to anyway.
You better not have more performances like this.
Well, correct. And I think the fact that they won 9 of their last 10 is being severely overshadowed in this argument, though, because yes, they lost to UNO last night, and you got to give UNO a lot of credit. I think they deserve more credit than maybe Nebraska.
It's more them than Nebraska.
Criticism, yeah, because you think about it, and UNO scored in every inning between the 4th and the 8th, so there's consistency on the offensive side. And Elijah said the gritty beats pretty motto for Nebraska. Well, UNO kind of adopted that last night because they were down to multiple 2-out, 2-strike scenarios last night, and they came out with runs. Now, some of that was due to Nebraska miscues, but they still put themselves in situations in order to capitalize there as well. And then, not only do they do that offensively, Charlie Bell was pretty good as a starter. He gave up only 2 runs. He was pulled after 4 1/3. And then the bullpen comes in. Yeah, they had struggles in the bottom of that 5th inning, I believe it was, when Nebraska tacked on 4 and retook the lead. They didn't score since. And then Sanders comes out of the bullpen, bases loaded, nobody out, 2, 3, 4 up for Nebraska in the lineup. Strikes them all out. The last one of the looking variety. I know the strike call on the 3rd strike was, debatable, but nonetheless, they were in the situation. They made the right moves to get out of the situation, and they executed when they needed to. Nebraska did make 3 errors last night. UNO only made 1, and UNO had 10 hits on 10 runs, so that's a pretty good offensive performance as well. So I think it's a lot of what UNO did and again, I know Nebraska made some errors in costly times, but UNO capitalized on said errors and executed well.
Part of it is Nebraska not finding a way to get that 3rd strike, get out of the inning, make the pitch, make the play. 8 walks, hit batters, inconsistent on the mound. So listen, I think this is like the final insult for Will Bolt and his team with a wake up call. Because he ain't going to take any more of it. He's going to probably they're probably still running foul poles, is what I'm saying.
Well, there is one thing to note here with the situation. I just got the text, someone much closer to the team than myself. I had not heard about this until just now. Apparently, there is some sickness going through this Husker baseball team right now, and there were some guys that were trying to play through some sickness last night.
Thank you for
Maybe
that.
that is a bit of a factor here. That would make a lot of sense based on the performance I saw last night. You saw guys that just did not look locked into the game. So, again, it's one game in baseball and stuff like that happens. Either you're not locked in, you're sick. That's the sport of baseball for you. I think that's what makes baseball so beautiful. But that is something that we should note here in this conversation. If that is
That's
true,
fair. Very
dealing
fair.
with sickness in baseball, that can make things very, very difficult.
Especially when the weather is 60 today and 30 tomorrow.
It is Nebraska. Props to Cam Freddick, the former Southwest Silverhawk, big-time dagger with his job at the dish to knock in this 2 RBI. So we'll see if Nebraska can regroup, rebound. They are off to Manhattan here for the weekend. And I'm not sneezing at 9 out of 10. Good for them. I'm not sneezing at Minnesota. Good for them. But you just, even if you had to have a slugfest and hang on barely and win a gorilla ball game 9-8 or 12-10, or you still win. You didn't get that done last night, and I think it's a teachable moment about face for Nebraska. They've been on point more times than they haven't this year. But you just wondered if they were to the point where they were immune from these type of unlocked-in performances. They are not. They're still trying to get better with it. And thanks for adding with Elijah's sources on team sickness. I appreciate that. Credit to UNO. Good for them. And they got a lot of really talented Nebraska kids on there.
They've won 6 of 8 now, too.
I know. I mean, so listen, I'm not trying to throw UNO in the garbage. That's not what this take is. I mean, good for them. I think they're talented. So I want to give them credit. But if you're Nebraska and you just go do what you do to Vandy not long ago, right, it's tough to take. Caleb Clark's got to get going for the Big Red.
Yeah, and it's a situation. I think the Omaha importance of like the in-state is this is a team that's had to battle with the same disadvantages that you have with practicing indoor through the spring. They've been playing in bad weather, and not to mention the fact that you have much better resources than a school like UNO. And again, it's baseball. The lesser teams, quote unquote, are going to come up and bite you sometimes. But this is just one of those reality check moments where you say, you know what, we can't blame the fact that, they're a Southern team. They've been practicing outside all spring. They've been able to go actually field fly balls. You can't blame that anymore because it's a team that has dealt with the exact same disadvantages that you have throughout the season. They came through and got it done last night. So it's not the end of the world by any means, but it's just one of those, as you mentioned, Schmidt, reality checks with this baseball team where you have to say, you know what, this is not a season where we can coast.
It's a mandatory, we got to be state champs. You want clean sweeps over Creighton and UNO if you're Nebraska baseball. If you don't, that's one instance where folks start talking. They start talking, what's going on with your program, what the heck's the deal. And I think Will Bolt's a heck of a coach. He's trying to get his guys to have their mind right every ball game. It's easier said than done. All right, let's talk about interesting minds. And that is one Aaron Rodgers. Somewhere, Mike Sauter is fist pumping. Somewhere else, just out of tribute to Joe Willie Namath, Gary Novotny is throwing on a fur coat in tribute to Joe Willie Namath from the late 60s. Aaron Rodgers to New York. This is how it sounded with Pat McAfee, how it went down. And Green Bay is now off of the Aaron Rodgers era.
Bears fans rejoice.
At this point, as I sit here, I think since Friday, I made it clear that my intention was to play, and my intention was to play for the New York Jets.
Okay.
And I haven't been holding anything up at this point. It's been compensation that the Packers are trying to get for me and kind of digging their heels in. So I would just I think it is interesting at this point to step back and look at the whole picture. My side, love and appreciation, gratitude for everything that Green Bay has done for me. So much love and gratitude and just heart open for the Packer fans.
Hell yeah.
And what it's meant to be their quarterback. And also the reality of the situation, it is what it is. The Packers would like to move on. They've let me know that in so many words. They've let other people know that in direct words. And because I still have that fire and I want to play and I would like to play in New York. It's just a matter of, getting that done at this point.
Okay, he had a nice visit with the Jets, probably leaning towards retirement, came out of the darkness retreat, found out Green Bay was shopping him, and on his way out the door said, I'm the greatest ever in Green Bay. So you're getting an incredible talent, reuniting with the offensive coordinator where you won back-to-back MVPs, the COVID MVPs. You've got Breece Hall coming off a knee injury. You've got talented weapons. You've signed Lazard. You're in a division that has Josh Allen and Tua right now and Mac Jones. So you're the oldest quarterback, but you're now maybe you're not Josh Allen, but
No,
you're still
top dog.
You're still Aaron Bleepin' Rodgers.
Right.
This is going to be fun, and it's the number one media market he's going to, and you're not a Giant, you're a Jet, so the sun is shining on the green and white for once. This is cool. This will be fun. And is this just a pit stop before a revenge tour in the NFC?
Please no.
Brett
please.
Favre style or not? But guys, reaction here. I'm just glad that the drama is over. Now there'll be a whole new drama in New York. But at least it's out of Green Bay's hands. Their fans have been put through the ringer, blessed with two awesome all-time quarterbacks, but also a lot of drama with both those guys.
Well, the drama now is not going to be where is he going to be next year, and it's now is he going to be playing next year? It's either be Jets or retirement. I don't think we've crossed the path of. I'm sure he's going to be paying for the Jets now. I think that's his preference, but retirement's still out there.
The deal will get done. He'll be in New York. That's where he wants to be. That's all good. We'll hit some spring football. Mr. Husker football, Mike Babcock next with Hail Varsity.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for spending time. It's Hail Varsity Radio. Bill Bender's sporting news, reaction to Aaron Rodgers, Husker spring football, thoughts on a national scale. It's been covering Nebraska football multiple decades. All things Nebraska. It's Mike Babcock time with Hail Varsity at MD Babs on Twitter. Babbers a week ago were courtside at PBA in the midst of state tournament time. We fast forward to now. It's one of those glorious spring days for Nebraska where the wind is about 40 miles per hour, but it's warm. And tomorrow it's going to need to have a little ice on your driveway so you don't go ice skating. How are you doing? And I want your take here on Husker baseball. Concerned about last night or just a hiccup?
I was, first of all, I saw my garbage can go bouncing across the driveway because of the wind. Second of all, I wanted to make an observation about Aaron Rodgers probably being the most egotistical player in the NFL at this point.
That's a big take, though, because there's a lot of choices.
That's true, but I tell you what, Aaron likes a lot of attention. I think this whole situation has been something that feeds his ego to the extent that he's going to play for the Jets. There's probably no question about that. And I say that knowing that, my parents lived in Chico, California, which is where he is from. My brother still lives there. And he did do some good things financially for Butte County, which is the county where Chico is. So I wanted to put that in there. But, the baseball thing, I was disappointed in the way Nebraska played. Now, Elijah said something about the possibility of sickness being a factor there. I still think Nebraska should have won that game with the proper focus. I didn't think that they came out as focused as they should have been. Omaha was 5-8 going into that game, so it wasn't even just it was Omaha. It was an Omaha team that hasn't had a winning record this year. And you've got to invest in that nitty gritty beats a pretty thing. You really have to believe that regardless of who you're playing. And it just didn't. That for me that was a disappointment. But I think that there obviously there's a lot of season left. Mm-hmm. Got Nicholls State here coming up and Creighton coming up, and you got another game with Omaha down the line in Omaha. Nebraska was one-on-one with Omaha last year, so focus. It's really important, I think. And you got to figure out that third starter, I think, is another thing that is going to be important for Nebraska going forward.
Mike, how important do you think just midweek games are going to be in general for this Husker baseball team this year? That's one of the things people keep coming back to with this performance is, you know what, it's just a Tuesday night game. You don't got the weekend starters out there. You know what? If you drop a few of those, it's going to be okay. What is your take on that sentiment in general? Is the weekend where it's really important for Nebraska, or do you think these Tuesday night and Wednesday night games are going to come back and have some weight by the time we get to the end of the year?
I think it's important. I think it's important for the development as far as identifying the pitching going forward. I think this is where you find out where these guys are going to be. And, I think there's a bright future for Clark. But I think he's getting off to a bit of a slow start. A freshman, it's been difficult for him. These are the kinds of games where you have to have the opportunity to get in there and do some things so that you feel confident enough that you can make a contribution on the weekend when you get into that conference season. That's going to be really important. So, I don't dismiss those midweek games in any way, shape, or form. It's important for you in developing the players that you're going to need when you play the weekend series when conference play begins.
Mike Babcock is with us on Hail Varsity Radio. Mike, now that Nebraska doesn't have the home weekend series, they have to go down to Kansas State, and you add the loss into that with UNO right before it, how much of an effect do you think that will have on this team this weekend now that they have to play a neutral site game rather than a home series?
Connor, I think that how it'll affect them is what Will Bolt will have said to them before they get down there to play that series. He won't let them, I think, use this as an excuse for the way they play in Manhattan, Kansas. I think that he'll get that focus back because that's the kind of person that he is. That's the kind of coach that he is. I'm sure that they got a pretty good estimation of how they played from Coach Bolt immediately after the game last night. And I think that it won't affect, if it affects them in any way, it will be more motivation than they would have had otherwise. I think they'll be focused.
Mm-hmm. Mike Babcock with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Mike, do you need a sweep this weekend to save this week? If you go 2-1, you end up at 500 on the week, and that's all right. But when you look at the level of competition, I almost lean to the fact that a sweep going 3-1 against Nicholls State and UNO seems to be what would be defined as a good week. But I want to get your take on that.
Well, yeah, obviously you'd like to win 3 games there, and let's see how it goes. But it's a question of pitching too. Again, you're not going to use your weekends. Well, you probably are going to use your weekend starters there, although you've got Creighton next week. So that's something that you're going to focus on as well. But I think that it's important if they can win 3 games in Manhattan, Kansas. I think that that counterbalances the Omaha loss certainly, and you get a scrappy Nicholls State team. Maybe you go 2-1 there. I don't think that's the end of the world, but ideally, 3 games. You win 3 games coming off of a loss.
Mike, let's talk spring football. Monday it gets rolling for Nebraska, and so many storylines, and I'm anxious to see Sims and the quarterbacks, the wide receiver room, as you're trying to find and reload at that spot, trying to find production for the departed Trey Palmer. Your running back room sounds pretty good. O-line's up in the air just because of some injury, and you flip it around defensively. It's different without Ty Robinson, but you got a lot of secondary guys to sift through, and then you got a bunch of new linebackers with some old guard still in the room. So I laid out some of those storylines. What are you anxious and interested in this spring, either be it from a player or position group or even Coach Rule? What's kind of got you cranked up for Monday?
Well, there's probably any of those areas that you mentioned probably would be interesting for me. The quarterback thing is interesting. Casey Thompson's not going to be able to do stuff because of injury, so you got Sims in there, and you've got Purdy, and you've got Smothers, and you got Torres and you got Harburg. I mean, you've got how many programs at this point have 6 quarterbacks on scholarship? The guys have not jumped to the portal. I think that's interesting. I'll be interested to see how Sims works, and how competitive that's going to become fall practice, because you've got a returning starter, but then you've got a guy that has starting experience at another school, and he adds one dimension that Satterfield said he doesn't want to get too active in doing it, and that is having a quarterback run the ball. Sims can do that. Gives him that advantage at quarterback. So obviously you're always interested in quarterback. I always bring up the offensive line, because I think that's important. That's how you're going to control the line of scrimmage, was one of the things that Coach Rule said he wanted to do. That was a priority. And so how both sides of the ball. So how does that shape up on both sides of the ball? Offensive line, who's up defense up front. It's going to be interesting to see this 3-5-5, how that comes across. And Dvoracek said, how do you describe Satterfield or White's defense? Chaos. He said. Well, let's see how that shakes out and who fits into that system to create the kind of chaos that they want to do. There's just, it's probably, I'm rambling here. There's probably no one area that I would necessarily focus on, although there are a lot of talented defensive backs. And, are some of those guys going to have to move on because they have so many? How does that fit into the equation come spring? Because after the spring, they've got to get down to 85, right? So we're looking at about 15, 16 guys that aren't going to be there.
Mike, if you had to predict it now, we get to April 24th, the Monday after the spring game. What do you think our topic of conversation is going to be? Last year, we were really focused on Anthony Grant in the running back room, as well as the performance of Jarrett Sinek, who had an awesome spring game performance. But once we reach that Monday, if you had to call it right now, what do you think we'll be talking about? Which guys? That's a tough question, I know.
I think The Departed.
I think we'd be talking about somebody that comes out of the receiver room. I think that's an area where I think it's going to be important. Who's going to step up? Marcus Washington is probably the guy with the most experience or the most receptions there. But who are going to be the guys that step up at receiver? Because I think that's going to be obviously important to the offense. I'd be interested to see who's going to be lining up at fullback, because that was one of the things that Satterfield said he wanted to use was fullback. And I wonder if we'll be talking about Fedoni the second, because of his confidence in himself. I mean, at the availability the other day, he said he had the ability of a Mackey Award candidate, and he could be the best tight end in the country, kind of thing. So he doesn't lack confidence. He appears to be healthy, and he's at a position that Satterfield has indicated that's going to be important to what they do, which is tight end.
Mike, about 30 seconds, a name or two at fullback, because there are none on the roster. We've highlighted that. Who do you think moves to that position? Do you have an early candidate?
That's a good question. Do you think that they're going to take somebody out of one of the bigger guys out of the running back room for that position?
They could. What about, you've seen quarterbacks transition. I don't know. Harburg, is he too athletic to put at fullback? And I'm not, Makovic is going to smack me just from what I just uttered. But is he a guy that, with his size and physicality, he's an athlete. Do you put him at that H-back fullback spot?
And his speed.
I know, right?
With the GPS thing, they said he was one of the fast. He and Smothers.
Yeah.
Were the fastest guys on the team based on that, or among the fastest guys. I don't know if you'd do that or not, or if you move a tight end there.
Yeah, we'll see.
My guess be more likely that you would do that.
Well, we'll see where it goes.
It'll be interesting to see.
Mike, we'll check in next week in the thick of spring ball. Thanks for the time today.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
Appreciate you, bud.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Well, we are going to effort Mike Schuchart here, Wilderness Ridge Golf, in just a moment. As he's like, huh? What? Connor's like, no, Shuey's putting for dough. We are not going to bother him. We are going to absolutely bother Shuey. Let me get you his cell number. But spend a minute here, Elijah. What are you choosing here on the menu with Scottie Scheffler's Masters menu?
Well, I was thinking about this morning. So Scottie Scheffler's Masters menu, he starts with the appetizers of cheeseburger sliders, top tier. Love cheeseburger sliders, along with firecracker shrimp. Not my favorite, but you know what? I can get down with it. Along with a tortilla soup, followed by the main course, a ribeye steak, or a blackened redfish. Those entrees come with family-style mac and cheese, jalapeno creamed corn, fried Brussels sprouts, and seasoned fries. We also have, for dessert, a warm chocolate chip skillet cookie with a milk and cookies ice cream. That's what Scottie Scheffler has picked for his Masters menu on, I believe that's Tuesday night before the Masters.
It is, and listen, I just give me a seat along for the ride with all those green jackets. I mean, how cool is that? We'll get into some things with Shuey here out at Wilderness Ridge.
What are you picking, though? Because I look and I think the requirement is for an appetizer, you go chili and cinnamon rolls.
Yeah.
That's a Nebraska requirement.
Yeah, I don't know if I go chili and cinnamon rolls, not to be anti-Nebraska, but I do need some corn on the cob with butter and salt.
He's here.
We have Shuey.
We have him.
All right, Mike Schuchart, Wilderness Ridge. Shuey, it's been a month. How are you?
I'm good. Corn on the cob, butter, salt. Oh, my gosh.
Pepper, too.
Doesn't get any better than that, does it?
No, I mean, we started off here as we were running you down. Scottie Scheffler's Masters dinner, his menu. What would Shuey pick? What's your? I'm not asking your last meal.
Though it could be about the same. It could be the same.
Yeah. What's your final
Whatever
meal?
you like.
What are you going with here? And do you like Scheffler's menu?
Yeah. That's a good old boy traditional menu. I'd go for something very different. I love what's called tonkatsu. It's a Japanese dish. It's breaded pork, sticky rice.
Ooh.
Cabbage.
Okay.
And it's called tonkatsu, or a Red Bull kind of sauce that goes on it.
Oh, beautiful. So is that going to be part of the Shuey menu at Wilderness Ridge here this fall?
I don't know if they'll go that far, but...
But, Mike, is there any element of choosing your Masters menu with some sort of competitive advantage here? Do you want to get those guys feeling all bloated for Wednesday?
Oh, dude, you're going to fire up
right?
those that can and can't take spice. Am I right?
That's exactly what you want, man. Get that get a little food poisoning going.
All right, guys, welcome to Elijah Herbel's Masters menu, where we're doing the Buffalo Wild Wings Blazing Challenge. Have fun. 12 wings,
Everybody
15
except
minutes.
for me. I mean, I think you gotta. I think the chocolate chip cookie skillet, that's got to be in there regardless. That's just me, but I think that might be the best item on the entire menu. It's a good menu. But I think that might be up there for best item.
Give me the ribeye steak.
The ribeye is good. Shuey, I think the old chicken fried steak with the cream gravy. You do a thick one, like mom would make. I mean, I think that's a choice. I think a New York strip's a choice, and then you got to go with some Nebraska beef, maybe some prime rib. Yes, the corn on the cob, mashed potatoes and gravy. Are you doing like a bloomin' onion or something for an appetizer?
Yeah, that. How about fried Brussels sprouts?
The fried Brussels sprouts with the eel sauce
I've never
the
had
dark
that
sauce.
before.
Really? You never had Brussels sprouts like that?
I've had roasted, not deep fried.
Up there, man, those are good. I never liked those until I had them.
Yeah.
They're delicious.
They're incredible. So we are talking all things Masters menu, and ironically, some of the things you can find at Wilderness Ridge on their menu. Shuey, what's been going on with you, bud? I mean, we've got a vicious day if you're hitting into it and a glorious day if it's behind you on the tee box. But how are things going at Wilderness?
Yesterday, and today, there's a lot of play out on the golf course, so people are getting a little anxious, man. Any nice day they get, they're taking advantage of, even though it's not that nice out there, but there's quite a few of them out there. That
is awesome.
I was going to ask, it's got to be next to impossible to hit a ball straight today. Obviously, if it's against at your back, but I assume there's a lot of crosswind happening throughout the course as well.
Oh, yeah. So you better make sure you factor that in there, or you're not going to keep it out of the trees. That's for sure.
Mike Schuchart's with us, Wilderness Ridge. Shuey, a thought here on Ricky Fowler and Tiger Woods and this tech league they're working on.
It's a pretty interesting concept. I kind of like it. I think it's going to bring it's just amazing. I go back to the Live thing. When Live came and all the stuff they're doing, it's amazing how new things are starting to come out. I think it's different. It's kind of matches the time that we're in as far as the new generation of players that are out there, the things that are out there. I mean, simulation golf is something that is here. I mean, everybody and their brother has a sim in their basement or somewhere that they're using and utilizing more all of the time. So it's like that technology is here to stay, and it's going to continue to develop. I talked to somebody the other day that they're working on this visual technology with simulation to where it's like it's almost real. When your head moves, it moves with you. So it's like when that technology is perfected, it's like, I don't know if golf would be played outside anymore. Man, everybody would be inside.
There's still something special to that course element, going and seeing the beauty of a golf course. There's something to that.
The aesthetics of it, that one time you get a birdie, for some of us, and quite frankly, Tito's and tonic. I mean, it's all a win. It's nice to be away from the wife, the kid, and again, I'm speaking for some and not others. It's great to be out there with the fellas, losing money and winning some money.
And get some sun, the weather. There's something, just the element of being on a golf course is different.
No question. Just being there, being in the environment, being in that situation, it's like you just can't, like 17 at the Players' Championship, you just cannot simulate that. I mean, that's one of those things you have to be at. Masters. I mean, that's just something you have to be on the grounds within the environment of the tournament to really get the true experience of what it is. I mean, it's just, you can't simulate that stuff. I mean, it's unreal.
Shuey, about 30 seconds, bud. What's happening with you, and how can folks get in touch if they want to join Wilderness or check things out? I know you've had the members' restaurant opened up, and it's been open for a little while.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Our tennis courts. So right now we got 3 tennis court pickleball courts. And so it seems like each month a little new additions coming all the time. So it's pretty exciting. It's pretty cool to see it all come together. So let's go to our website. All the information on there. What's available, who to contact, all right there.
All right. Shuey, we will run you down next week. Thanks for the time, bud.
You bet. Thanks for having me. Stay safe.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Hour 1 winding down. Podcast available for you. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or watch the entire show or the segments you like. Hail Varsity YouTube channel. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. Hour 2. Bill Bender, Sporting News, his take on Aaron Rodgers, Husker spring football, some NFL moves and shakes that are going on with free agency. So a good sit down with Bill Bender. In about 10 minutes, we'll spend time with Evan Bland, more Husker baseball and spring football thoughts, and then Dr. Brandon Seifert, a Jock Doc with Nebraska Orthopedic Center. What's the latest on Luka? As we remind you to get buckled up. One of every 3 fatal crashes in Nebraska involves an alcohol-impaired driver. Why take chances? If you drink, don't drive. A message from the Nebraska Department of Highway Safety Office. We'll get to some of your stream comments here next hour as well. Can email Chris at HaleVarsity.com, 489-1240, the number to get in. Excited tomorrow as it is time for the madness. That is all we're thinking about here. We will declare our Final Fours, all of us here at 5:50. I'm getting a oh no stare from Connor unless he's trying to burn a hole through me. Elijah,
I'm the favorite.
Are you ready?
Oh, yeah, no, we got the brackets in there.
Okay.
I've been ready. I've been ready.
Good. We will make our declarations here at 5:50 before we say goodbye. Come see us tomorrow on the road. Are you thirsty? You want to watch some basketball? 4 to 6 road show, Longwells in the rail yard where we're going to be. So you're invited down, pull up a bar stool and order a drink, find their menu. Great folks down there. Excited to be on the road to get things kicked off the right way down in the rail yard, Longwells, for plenty of basketball tomorrow, 4 to 6 road show. So that's on the docket there. Do you root against your bracket if the game gets too good? Have you found yourself in that mode?
Oh,
Absolutely,
yeah.
You do.
Especially for an upset.
Sure.
It's like last year, I found myself in that situation pretty quickly just because Kentucky lost right away. Mm-hmm. So at that point, all bets were off.
Kentucky nuked everybody a year ago.
Right. Like, at that point, I was like, chaos. Just give me chaos.
Well, the key to happiness in March
is alcohol.
I wasn't going to say that. I got a different one, which is also not advised, similar to alcohol. It's not advised, but it is a fun little tip or trick. Drive to Council Bluffs and make every bet against your bracket. Therefore, no matter what happens, you're winning. Either your bracket wins or you're making a little money for the old pocket. Win-win.
That was a trick my dad would pull every Nebraska-Oklahoma game.
The emotional hedge bet.
He would bet on OU. So if OU covered and won, if Nebraska covered, but OU, either way, it was a win-win. So he wouldn't be as ticked off if Nebraska got beat by Oklahoma. At least there'd be some more money. Or if Nebraska won and it cost him a couple $100, so be it. Nebraska finally beat Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. So, no, you do it. You go with your head one way, you go with your heart the other. And someday we'll be able to drive down there to near Highway 77 in Saltillo and actually put a bet in, but not yet this year.
I'm going to get killed on the blackjack tables before I ever do that, whenever those get installed.
We'll have to pick Danny Burke's brain with Wiesen tomorrow on some of the weekend matchups and some reaction to the early round games. Hour 2, Bill Bender coming up at Hail Varsity, and we're presented by Currency.
The voice of Husker Nation is on the air. This is Hail Varsity Radio. Insight, opinion, expertise, along with the biggest names talking Nebraska sports. Join in with the show at 402-489-1240 or 1-800-825-5865. Now, here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel.
Back into it. It's Hour 2 at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by Currency. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Connor Clark. We welcome in guy that's all over the gridiron, Bill Bender, Sporting News. Follow Bill, read Bill, sportingnews.com, and his Twitter handle at BillBender92. Bill, got to get your reaction. The quarterback news of the day, Tampa and Baker Mayfield. Kidding. How's Bill Bender doing today?
I'm fine. I'm a Packers fan, but it's not
I know.
I had a couple buddies texting me, and I'm like, I didn't even watch because I know that's where this thing's going. Obviously, the Packers are going to have trade compensation, and nothing's going to happen until that's worked out. But it's probably best for both. I mean, it's clear that Aaron Rodgers wants to move on, and it's very clear that the Packers want to move on. And I have very good memories of Aaron Rodgers as a player with the Packers, but also recognize that pretty much everything, and I would go before the Love pick. I would go when they lost 37-21 to the Niners in the NFC Championship game. It's pretty much been downhill from there.
Bill, I want to dive into the Packer fandom for just a second more. And how have you, I don't want to say dealt with, but absorbed two all-world quarterbacks, and how things ended. Not necessarily that they moved on to other teams, but just the drama associated with each.
Well, I mean, I know the popular tweet out there is like they've had 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks for 30 years and they only won 2 Super Bowls. Well, they won 2 Super Bowls. And in the last 30 years, there's only 7 other franchises that have won 2 Super Bowls. And they've had countless great moments. And they played in 9 NFC championship games between the 2 of them. If this was college basketball, you'd be talking about a coach with 9 Final Fours, and that's legendary. But, yeah, I think the end and the frustration of getting that second Super Bowl is very strong parallel with Brett Favre, who missed opportunities, and Aaron Rodgers, who obviously I think some of the frustrations with management. Chris, I think one of the great ironies of this whole thing is I'm going to laugh because I'm old now. When I was 28, I was all upset about Favre leaving. Now I'm 43. I'm just like, I guess I'm prepared for it. And I will laugh when they draft a tight end and a receiver with their first 2 picks.
out of spite, right? I love that. That's pretty good.
Well, will you laugh when Aaron Rodgers inevitably gets dealt to the Vikings after 1 year with the Jets? It just seems like he's following that Brett Favre playbook to a T.
Well, I mean, but that's the thing. People choose what they want to remember from that. And you could remember that Brett Favre went to the Vikings and won the first game at Lambeau Field, or you could, like I tried to remind people, I was like, okay, what happened his second season? I was like, Green Bay beat them both times and won a Super Bowl, and Minnesota still never won a Super Bowl. So if that's the path he chooses, so be it. I think Aaron Rodgers is on his own, kind of path. I mean, I think he's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. Do I need to hear him talk for 45 minutes on Pat McAfee? Probably not. I mean, I'm just being honest.
Bill Bender with his sporting news. Hail Varsity Radio at Bill Bender 92. Bill, let's stay in the NFL for a little bit here. And what's your take on the Bears with what they've done? Moving back in the draft and getting rid of the number 1 pick overall. All signs point to Young being the guy out of Bama. And, let's talk about your division rival for a moment, Chicago.
Well, let's not forget a sneaky good pickup with Tremaine Edmonds as well. A great linebacker they picked up.
That was good.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to be better. I think Justin Fields needs more help. He's obviously a dynamic talent dating back from his days at Ohio State. I think it gives Carolina an opportunity there. I mean, yeah, it's a dated reference, but I always, if you go back to the Wizard of Oz, I feel like the other NFC North rivals feel like, the witch is dead or whatever, and they've got these opportunities. I mean, Minnesota's going to be pretty good. I think Detroit's on the ascent as a franchise, and, that was a big psychological game for them to knock Green Bay out last year. So there will be challenges. I still think the Bears are behind those 2, even with that trade, but clearly pointing in the right direction. And anybody that watched Justin Fields last year knows that he didn't have much around him, so that's why he had to run as much as he did.
I completely agree, Bill, because I am a Bears fan. So I thank you for saying that, because there's been a lot of people that are saying, well, maybe they should just get rid of Justin Fields. But I'm glad we're on the same page there. To follow up the Bears trading back with the Carolina Panthers, there have been some reports of the Panthers maybe being open to trading back from that number 1 spot, just like the Bears did. And I was talking about this with some people, and I'm curious to get your take here. The Panthers essentially have already set the market price for that number 1 overall pick. Do you think they could sell it back for maybe even more, or do you think they stay at number 1?
Well, that's a great question. It depends on which quarterback that they believe in. So for me, the whole thing with the Bears and Fields was, okay, if they're going to actually move Fields and go in on a Bryce Young or a C.J. Stroud, they better be darn sure what they're doing. And I don't know, with Carolina, I think they will end up drafting one of these 2. And it's tough because as somebody that covers college football, I mean, to me, if we were just basing it on college and what I've seen in them in college, Bryce Young's the number 1 pick. The guy's a wizard. He's a playmaker. He did so many fantastic things at the college level. But if you're going for the safe pick, it's probably C.J. Stroud because of his size, his accuracy. Pretty good player, too. I mean, he showed that in that Georgia game. That's the game tape he wants to show. So Carolina's going to have to believe in one of those 2 guys, I think. And if they really do, then they probably won't trade back. And as Chicago, since you're a Bears fan, I think they got to do what they have to do to get Will Anderson on that team. That's who I would draft if I'm the Bears.
Bill Binder's with us here. It's Hail Varsity Radio. And Bill, whenever you look at those first-round quarterbacks, you've watched a lot of these guys in college. What's your big board? I think everyone is in agreement. It's C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young at the top, but then you have Levis and you have Richardson. And I want to get your take on just what that first-round big board of quarterbacks looks like to you. If you're an NFL GM, how would you rank those guys?
I mean, Stroud and Young. I like Young, but others like Stroud better, and that's fine. I think Young, I'm less worried about his size. I think something that stuck with me with him was, I always tell the story, I had a recruiting guy, Adam Gorney, tell me before the guy started, he said he's going to look like the smallest guy on the field, and then he's going to go dominate everybody, and that's exactly what he did for 2 years. But can he hold up against an NFL pass rush? And then I'd go Stroud. Then it's a toss-up. I mean, I would take Anthony Richardson if I've got a starter and I can let him develop and be a little patient, because I don't think we've seen enough. I mean, we saw a lot at the Combine, obviously. I don't know that we've seen enough on the field. And then Will Levis would be next. And then you get into second-day quarterbacks. One of the quarterbacks that stood out the Combine, you're going to laugh probably, is I thought Stetson Bennett looked really good. Mm-hmm. So if I was looking for a high-end backup, I mean, the experience is there, the winning mentality, the chip, all those things, and he threw the football pretty well.
Stetson does a nice job. I mean, he's really talented. He's earned what he's gotten despite being over-recruited. He's well schooled based on his age with just the college experience, and you would think the maturity aspect going into the next level. So that's not a bad thought at all. A few more minutes, Bill Bender spending time with us here on Hail Varsity, talking some NFL. We'll get to the NCAA tournament in just a moment, but spring football starts in Lincoln Monday. A lot of folks around here excited about Coach Rule. The learning curve on a lot of people's mind with this new 3-3-5 defense, and a lot of assessment time for Nebraska this spring. But, Bill, they've done a really good job in the portal again, and they've landed some heavy hitters not only from Georgia but from the SEC. And the attitude is there's less of a reload clearly with year one, but the rebuild prospect seems to be a good thing for success in year one, unlike previous first years, because the situation's different for Coach Rule here in Lincoln versus Baylor or even a Temple.
Yeah, and he was the makeover expert at both of those programs, and I think that's why there's a lot of positive vibes around Nebraska. I don't know where they'll be in 5 years, but I know right now in the present there's a lot of positive momentum, and it starts with that quarterback battle, and that's what I'll be watching in the spring, which one of those guys is going to do it, and how does it translate? I mean, Wisconsin's also pressing the reset button. We've talked about that. That Big Ten West division is always pretty wide open, and I think Nebraska will have some opportunities next year. But I'm not ready to measure anywhere close to measuring them to the beast in the East. That may take a while before they're up on Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State's level.
No, absolutely same page there, just because of what's been pretty consistent with Ohio State and Penn State. Penn State seems ready to jump. I want to talk about Big Ten expansion. Some murmurs out there about maybe a commissioner by May or June. And I want to get your gut or tea leaf reading on expansion. Do you think Oregon and Washington are the next targets? Obviously, Notre Dame's a discussion point, but their path to the playoff is still really pretty good, and so far so good for them with TV. So those are the two things that need to go sideways for them to actually join a league. But overall, is there future intercepts happening here with the Pac-12 in your opinion?
I'll find out. I think obviously the Pac-12 could get carved up. There's been some reports about the Big 12's interest in Colorado and Arizona, and I think Dion, there's definitely a factor there. I mean, the news is their spring game is going to be on ESPN. I can't even remember remotely a time where Colorado was interesting enough to have their spring game on ESPN. You'd have to go back to Darian Hagan probably.
Yes, you would.
That's not a bad reference, by the way, and I know that's one Nebraska fans know very well.
We loved Hagan. We loved Hagan when he was done.
Exactly. So if the Pac-12 gets carved up and Washington and Oregon become Big Ten schools, it would make sense. And that's an interesting question for USC this week because they're flying here. I'll be in Columbus on Friday. They're playing Michigan State. Didn't hit me till somebody I work with made the joke. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's a Big 12 game pretty soon, or a Big 10 game pretty soon. So be interesting to see if they can add more travel partners on that side of the country, which I think they should.
Maybe cue the air raid sirens here, Connor, as actually I don't have those ready for you. I apologize. But I need to quickly hit the Raiola radar here with Bill because it's been a heated recruiting battle. And if you follow national recruiting at all, you know the name Dylan Raiola, the former number 1 player in that class of 2024. And Bill, how much have you heard about Raiola, the recruitment to Nebraska? Husker fans seem to think, me included, that a Raiola win on the recruiting trail would really instantly change Nebraska's fortunes.
I don't know if he's still his quarterback coach, but I was talking to Mike Giovando a couple years ago. And he was telling me, I was talking to him about a different quarterback, and he said, well, I got one coming in that everybody's going to want. And sure enough, it was Raiola. Good story to have in the back pocket. But I think if Nebraska can get him, and they do have an in on him, it's kind of like the NFL. You want to be a coach for a long time, you have good quarterbacks. And at the college level, you look at Ohio State, and they've produced 3 straight first-round quarterbacks. Dwayne Haskins, whose life obviously was cut short way too soon, and then Justin Fields and C.J. Stroud, and you got to figure Kyle McCord's in line. That's how you build it. You start sending guys to the NFL, and people want to go to your school. Alabama's done the same thing. Oklahoma's done the same thing. Lincoln Riley's doing the same thing at USC now. So that's how important that Raiola commitment could be.
Bill, your Final Four and what you're looking for the next couple of days with the madness that is going to ensue.
Well, I'll be in Columbus, like I said, so I get a shot to see Zach Edey up close. I'm kind of excited about that, watching the 7'5" guy do some work. I got Kansas, Texas, and Alabama. I think Alabama's got the easiest road out of those 4. So, it's not very exciting. I think it will be wide open. There's always upsets to blow up your bracket. I'm looking forward to it. Kansas, I'm a little hesitant on just because of not only what's going on with Bill Self, but I don't like picking teams to go far that I've seen get blown out multiple times, and that's what makes this so interesting is every one of these teams that you think could win it definitely has flaws.
It is going to be a wide open tournament. I've got a little bit more lean towards Arkansas. I like your Duke call. Texas is fun. They're talented. They've persevered. They're pretty dynamite. Ultimately, though, I've got Arizona and Houston, and I've got Kelvin Sampson getting the brass ring.
Well, and he would deserve that at that point. I mean, they've got to have a healthy Marcus Sasser, but, I mean, he's really done a fantastic job there at Houston. 40th anniversary of them losing to NC State. There would be some irony on that. And getting to Houston and getting a ring. So, a ring, sorry. Yeah, but it's going to be fun. I never take issue with anybody's bracket because I'm like, it's anybody's guess. But we had a lot of fun putting the content at Sporting News. Mike DeCourcy's doing a lot of work. We've been putting it in this week, having a lot of fun doing it. I had fun watching the games last night.
It was great. Bill Bender, Sporting News, sportingnews.com, at Bill Bender 92, where you follow him, do so. Bill, we'll talk a little bit further down the road with some spring football. Thanks for the time today.
Hey, no problem. Thanks so much for having me on, guys.
Gotta love chatting some college hoops, some college football, and Green Bay Packer fan reaction with Bill Bender, Sporting News. Appreciate him. Reminder.
He was surprisingly nice to Connor, by the way. Just throw that in.
Well, and let's flip it around. Connor is surprisingly nice to Bill Bender.
I think that's more accurate.
Right? Hey, look, it's Bears fan and Packer fan, and they're not screaming obscenities at one another over the phone. Evan Bland going to join us. We'll talk some Nebraska spring football thoughts, some of those further storylines, and Evan's take on Big Red Baseball, the tough one last night at Haymarket against UNO. Reminder, roadshow tomorrow for all your basketball needs down at Longwell's, 4 to 6 with a Hail Varsity Roadshow.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Back into it. It's Hail Varsity Radio. We're presented by Currency. Time with Evan Bland right now, Omaha World Herald at Evan Bland, OWH, where you find him on Twitter. Evan, you were at Haymarket last night. A head-scratching loss for Nebraska baseball. Let's start there. and more bullpen troubles for Will Bolt.
Yeah, it's one of those wonky midweek games where no team can keep the lead, and you've got 12 pitchers that take the mound. So, like, in the broader sense, it's sort of how it is in baseball, and more specifically in college baseball, where you're not going to use your best pitchers, and the weather's still warm enough, so there are a lot of things that you can kind of throw into it. That said, yeah, I mean, it was, I think, probably the sloppiest that Nebraska's played since opening weekend. And they've played pretty well since then. They've won 9 of their last 10. They've become a top 25 offense, top 10 defense in terms of fielding percentage. But, yeah, I mean, you kicked the ball around a little bit last night, 3 errors. You strike out multiple times when the offense just looks like it might get you back over the top, and then the pitching regressed and started walking batters, hit multiple batters as well. So, yeah, I mean, for one night it looked like a regression for Nebraska. But, again, ultimately in the marathon that is college baseball, your top objective is to win the weekends, win more midweeks than you lose, while hopefully bringing along some younger players and giving them experience, and then that should set you up the rest of the way. I think maybe what can sometimes make these midweeks more concerning for a team like Nebraska is that you just don't have a lot of opportunities to make up for missed chances. It's likely, it's possible that Nebraska won't play another ranked team this year if Maryland or Iowa don't get in there the rest of the way. So you really have to start taking care of business, winning the games that you should win, and then you get into the Big Ten play and hopefully build some momentum from there. But I would say, with possibly the exception of the San Diego series to open the season, this was probably the first game that you look at and you say, man, that's a thing that Nebraska probably should have won, probably should have taken care of. Their demeanor, I think, agreed with that assessment afterward. But again, if you go and you look good against Nichols this weekend, and then you play well against Creighton, and then Illinois comes to town to open Big Ten play, I think this becomes a blip on the radar. If this starts a trend or pattern, then there's probably a little bit more reason for concern moving forward.
Yeah, and I think in baseball, Evan, especially, you look at that game last night between Mexico and Great Britain, where Mexico barely squeaked by Great Britain, and they have the talent advantage. That just happens in baseball sometimes. It's an off night. The pitchers don't have it. You're not focused, and that might have been the story from last night whenever you look at the 3 errors. But when you specifically look at the bullpen, it kind of felt like they were starting to turn a corner. How concerned are you with that bullpen as it stands right now?
Well, I think it depends on the night. So, first of all, Michael Garza starts the game and he goes 3 scoreless and looks pretty good, and then he leaves the game. And the reason he leaves the game, and Will Bolt said as much afterwards, is because they want him to be available this weekend against Nichols when you play Thursday and then a doubleheader Friday. So he only had 45 pitches. If this was a game that Nebraska, absolutely had to have, Garza could have gone probably 3 more innings, and then that shortens things the rest of the way. But they want to get some other arms a chance. They want to preserve their top relievers, in this case with Garza, for some of those weekend games. So, you put Caleb Clark out there, and it's been a rough go for him, really, since the Ole Miss game a couple weeks ago when he got hammered and didn't make it out of the first. This time he didn't get it out. Give up 4 runs. So it's been rough for him. I think he's someone that you want to see do well in the midweek before you can throw him back in a high-leverage spot in the weekend. I think Mason Ornelas sort of falls into that same category as well. Has the pedigree. It's come from a power program like A&M, but you just want to see a little more consistency there. And then, they take the lead back in the mid-innings, and you bring in your closer, Shea Shanneman, and that sort of signaled to me that Nebraska wasn't messing around, and they want to win this thing. And what happens? He walks 2 guys, and then the Lincoln kid, Cam Frederick, hits a double down the left field line. UNO takes the lead, and that was the end of it. So, I think and this is true with most college baseball bullpens, but there's always room for improvement on the back end, especially. I think coaches have been optimistic that Drew Christo could take another step. That hasn't necessarily materialized to this point. But again, I think if you're on the weekends and you are trying to shorten the game, I mean, they have the starters right now with Emmett Olson, Jace Kaminska, Jackson Brockett, Michael Garza. I think any one of those 4 guys could give you a quality start at any given moment. And then at that point, it becomes, okay, what do you do with the last 2 or 3 innings. I think Jalen Worthley has earned his way into that circle of trust. Shanneman had an off night, but he's been pretty solid. So I think you can piece it together and find a way. But again, if you don't have those depth of arms, the midweek is when that really is exposed. And that's why you often see so many pitching changes and high scoring affairs. And so I think just like a lot of teams, Nebraska's working through that. You're trying to figure out who you trust in those biggest, tensest moments. And, hopefully they can start doing that here now at about the quarter pole of the season.
Evan, let's talk about the offense last night. And it seemed like Griffin Everett and Efrain Cervantes was almost a 1-2 punch at the bottom of the lineup because they would get on base. And the first 2 times that each of them reached, they both scored in multiple innings. But then they get the party started in the 8th, and then Nebraska has bases loaded, nobody out. They get 3 straight strikeouts. What is your takeaway from the offense last night despite putting up 6 runs?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like we're saying. Like, it just felt like that first weekend where you're getting base runners, you're putting the pressure on the pitchers, and then you just need that one hit to really break things open, and they didn't have it. I mean, like you said, bases loaded, nobody out, 8th inning, you're down 4, and you've got the heart of your order up. Cole Evans was the Big Ten Player of the Week last week, strikes out. Max Anderson still hitting over 400, like 425 or whatever it is, strikes out. And then I think it was Fisher after that, and then probably maybe a generous called third strike that maybe he wouldn't agree with there. But yeah, I mean it's a situation where at the very least make a couple of productive outs, get that thing to 10-8, and then maybe put some more pressure on in the 9th. And Omaha does not have a deep pitching staff necessarily either. I mean their team ERA is well above 7, so there was absolutely an opportunity if you could have put a little bit of pressure there on the 8th. So it didn't happen. But again, like at some point that is baseball. Like you're not always going to get those key hits with runners in scoring position. They have been doing that quite a bit. I still think they're hitting over 300 in those sort of spots this season. But for one night, it didn't happen. And I think when you lose to an in-state school like Omaha in the midweek, that's going to get fans' attention a little bit more than if they were to, say, drop a couple against Nichols this weekend. So I think that plays a little bit into how you perceive this outcome as well.
Spring football, it is in full gear on Monday. And, Evan, really good story in the newspaper today with some of your spring questions. And you start off talking attrition, right? Because Nebraska is still overfloweth, so to speak, with numbers and people. But the spring's really going to tell the tale of not only kind of fitting in with how Rule wants to run things, but also it's really big assessment-wise to see where guys stack up and if some guys still have a spot.
Right. I mean, it's not a typical spring in a lot of ways. Like you're always going to have your position battles, and I think those are compelling in their own ways. But you add to that, it's year one with a new coaching staff, with new systems coming in on offense, on defense, the advent of the transfer portal and how those guys mix in with some of the players that are returning. And then, yeah, I mean, attrition's absolutely going to be part of the conversation because, again, by rule, you got to be down to the 85-man scholarship limit by fall. And Nebraska, once it gets all of its signees here over the summer, is going to be right at around 100. So, factor in that Nebraska is almost certainly going to add somebody else through the portal when it opens up in mid-April. And you're talking, 15 to 20 guys that will have to depart in some way. They have to trim that thing down. And so these position battles become not just what does the depth chart look like, but it sort of takes on this NFL, fall camp sort of situation where you're going to have, you don't want to call them cuts, but situations where players see the writing on the wall and they say, okay, I'm not in the top 2 or 3 at my position. So, you're going to have the option to look elsewhere, potentially to change positions, I think, in some situations. I know that's something Matt Rule told us at the World Herald last month was he wasn't ready to talk about which positions were the strongest on the team, but he did feel like, having looked at the film from last year and the workouts, that there were a number of guys who could benefit from changing spots, whether that's, from like minor changes like inside back or to outside, side or whether we're talking different sides of the ball. So there's a lot going on here. I think that the coaches have gotten to know the players as people over the last few months, and now that next step is those firsthand evaluations where you put on pads, you have some good contact, and you see what these guys can do, and you start building a scheme and building a roster based on what you see over these next 15 practices.
Evan, a thought on just what position group is going to be the cleanest to assess? You've got different position groups that are super important, O-line specifically, but you've got guys that'll be missing. Same with the D-line. So what's the healthiest position group to assess?
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting one. I'd probably say running back off the top of my head. I mean, you've got a lot of known quantities there. As far as I know, those guys are healthy and back. I mean, you've got Anthony Grant. I think A.J. Allen's, ramping up and should be back. You have just guys that have done it before. And obviously that's complicated by what does the line look like and who's handing them the ball and all the rest. But it does feel like you can go through so many other spots on the team and say quarterback, well, Casey Thompson's going to be out. O-line, well, there's a lot of shuffling and guys that are still working their way to full health there as well. So, I mean, really on the offensive side, I think there's a lot of spots where you're just going to have to take this thing into the summer and into the fall a little bit. And I think there are a lot of guys too, even if you're not talking about just health, you're talking about, just unknowns, like what does Xavier Betts bring to the equation after he's been out of football for a year? We don't really know. So I think there's a lot of intrigue going into this thing. Thomas Fidone as a tight end, what does he look like, after his second ACL recovery? How explosive is he? How much does he sort of resemble that top prospect that he was a couple of years ago? So I think running back's probably that spot where you have the depth to rotate guys. You have film that you can see from the past, and you know what they can do. Gabe Irvin's another example, Ramir Johnson. So, we'll see. But I think that's probably a spot of any, certainly on offense, where at the end of spring, you'll probably have at least a decent sense of what the pecking order could be.
Evan Bland with us from the Omaha World Herald. Find him on Twitter at Evan Bland, OWH. Evan will gear up for some more spring thoughts next week. Thanks for jumping on with us today.
Thanks, guys.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
Thanks for hanging out Wednesday with Hail Varsity, presented by Currency, a Jock Doc Wednesday, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. And Dr. Brandon Seifert with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Dr. Brandon, you got the bracket handled. How we doing?
Feeling good on the bracket. How about yourself, buddy?
Oh, good. We are going to unveil here in about 10 minutes. We have a side wager that's probably not legal, but it'll work out okay. I mean, all parties will be happy, and at least you were in a dogfight. I'm getting the side eye from Elijah and Connor right now.
I'm just trying to figure out how is that illegal?
Well, I mean,
wagering is now legal in the state of Nebraska.
Allegedly, I mean, you can't do it.
Well, yeah,
you can do it, but you can't find a place to do it.
This would be unlicensed. This is more like a pool. But the thing is like March Madness pools are 100%
right now.
legal.
Dr. Brandon's going prank caller.
I got nothing out there. No wagers. Just written out bracket. That's all I got.
That's pretty good. Let's spend a minute keeping with the basketball theme, and we're gearing up for playoff time. We know that there's been the fight for load management, and I know the NBA and fans aren't happy with that. You shift from the load management to the wear and tear part of things. And Dr. Brandon, I want to get your take here on Luka from the Mavs, missing his third consecutive game tonight with a high thigh strain. And man, that sounds all sorts of bad, first of all, and it sounds all sorts of re-injurable as well. Let's talk about this thigh strain.
Yeah, absolutely. I wished they would have been a little bit more forthcoming in the information they tossed at us, but we're trying to put the pieces together here in terms of what he has. A couple of things with him. I missed 3 games. As I went back and kind of dug into this a little bit further, he talks about, it's essentially a non-contact injury from his perspective. You usually kind of that thigh strain, especially a higher thigh strain, you're thinking more like maybe a Charlie horse, get hit by another player's knee, and it does not sound like that was the issue. In fact, in some of the dealings that he's had, some of the interviews he's had, he didn't even say anything about, noticing one time when he felt like there was a pop there. So it sounds like it was a deal where he woke up the next day from a game, was pretty sore. So you can kind of speculate here in terms of where this would be. You've got a couple of things we're kind of thinking about the thigh side. I'm thinking more this is probably on the quad side, which is more on the front side of the thigh. You could even dip in a little bit further up where it might be like a hip flexor where you kind of pull that hip up in front. That could be another issue. But as he describes this more, he talks about it hurts when he basically takes off and jumps. And so that's probably more a quad type injury. So as we start talking about that, quadriceps, those would be the muscles on the front side of your thigh that allows you to kind of bring your foot up from the floor and extend your knee. Also, is heavily involved with jumping and also with your landing. So we're probably looking more at a quad strain would be what I would go with on this one, even though we're not getting a lot of clear information. They did an MRI in it. Sounds like MRI was okay. Didn't show a whole lot going on. And so that kind of begs the question here, how long is he out? What are we looking at for recovery? And then to your point, Chris, obviously kind of a high chance for kind of re-injury in this area, especially with obviously all the jumping and cutting that he does.
All right, Dr. Brandon, I'm going to take you through my very basic anatomical knowledge here, and you can hold your applause till I'm done here. But when I think of the quadriceps, I do know that is a muscle group that's composed of 4 different muscles, hence quad. And does it matter? Mm-hmm. Thank you, Connor. Connor gives me some applause. I appreciate it. Does it matter which of those 4 is injured in this scenario? Could it be a mix and mash of a couple different of those muscles? How does a quadriceps injury work?
Yeah, absolutely. It is great anatomy there. Should I pull out the golf clap on that one? That's amazing. And so as we think about that, Elijah, there definitely are those different parts of the quad. And so the one we talk about frequently on the radio is the one that's kind of off just above your kneecap to the inside. That's called the VMO, and that's more for kind of knee pathology, and so we're probably not dealing with that one. The one that we see more with, kind of that deceleration, so you're running down the floor, then you put the brakes on and stop, that's going to be that kind of quadriceps femoris right down the center, and that's probably more what he's dealing with. That's also kind of that explosive muscle in the front when you are jumping, and so that's probably what we're dealing with in this scenario, and again, different from the one down close to the knee, and then more on the quad muscle on the outside of the thigh, coming from the vastus lateralis on the outside. That's going to be more some side cutting, and you tend to see those injuries more with kind of direct impact. It tends to be more where those kind of Charlie horse type injuries occur.
Dr. Brandon Seifert with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Jock Doc Wednesday. Luka's our topic as he is trying to recover with that thigh strain. And what's the process for you? And is this has there ever been a surgical intervention with thigh issues?
Yeah, in a couple scenarios, yes, Chris. And so when these present, you're really kind of looking at where out along that muscular structure as the injury occurred. And so if we travel further down to where that quad muscle, that main quad muscle hooks onto the top of the kneecap, you can rupture that. And so that'd be a quad tendon rupture. That obviously would be a surgical scenario. As you move further up, it kind of becomes more like the hamstring, where if you tend to kind of stretch or tear that in the muscular belly, that just needs time to kind of heal back. Really not an indication there for surgical intervention. It's truly kind of in the muscular portion. Very rare injury where you could actually pull that quad tendon off of the bone where it attaches up around the pelvis. Again, a very extremely rare injury. That would be something you have to think about, a potential surgical intervention if that happened. Obviously not the case here. The one scenario that could result in this is, we have a lot of patients these days on blood thinners. Mm-hmm. If somebody does take like a direct impact to the thigh, a Charlie horse, that breaks up some of the muscle, you get some bleeding in the area, throw a blood thinner on top of that, they can get some kind of dangerous bleeding in that area where, because you're on a blood thinner, it just doesn't stop, and you fill up this whole compartment full of blood, and that can create other issues where it causes trauma and potentially cell death because there's too much pressure there, and you have to go and actually drain out the hematoma or collection of blood. Obviously not the scenario here. Outside of that, if it was more of a contact type injury, the thing we do worry about in athletes like him, like a bad Charlie horse, would be if you have enough trauma to that muscle, that inflammatory response can create actually bone in muscle, which is called heterotopic ossification, and that can be a scenario where potentially you have to think about going in and removing some of that bone albeit not a great option. And fortunately for him, we're not dealing in that scenario. So really in a scenario with him, I wouldn't feel that surgical intervention is something kind of in the cards for him. Maybe some type of intervention where we start talking about injections, something like the stem cell PRP would be a potential help to him from a modality. I wouldn't want to use a steroid up here just because that creates more kind of trauma in the area, increased risk of further rupture. But a PRP stem cell regimen might be on the plate for him if we can't get him better, getting closer to playoffs.
Dr. Brandon, last thought here before we get you out, about 30 seconds. How does this affect Luka's future? He's not elite in terms of speed, in terms of vertical. Where he is elite from his athletic testing numbers is that start-stop ability, the acceleration and deceleration. Do you see that this injury affecting that towards this tail end of the season?
Yeah, I do, Elijah. I think this will be a bit of a struggle for him through the playoffs. And then I think as he has time to recover, rest after season, I don't think this will be a big long-term thing for him.
Dr. Brandon Seifert with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. Luka, our topic, and good stuff as the NBA postseason nears, and all sorts of basketball gets tipped off tomorrow. Should be good. Dr. Brandon, always great to spend time with you. We'll talk some more ball with you next week. Thanks for the time today.
Great, fellas. Y'all take care.
You too.
Bye
there
now.
he is, Dr. Brandon Seifert with us, Nebraska Orthopedic Center. We'll wind down a Wednesday as we're on the road tomorrow at Longwell's.
And now, back to Hail Varsity Radio.
All right, get your crayons ready. It's time to talk tournament. Biggest upset, games to watch, Final Four. Here we go. And have we decided the bottle, or are we still on the winner chooses?
Winner's choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it'll be Tito's for me. Elijah, what's your poison? Do you want Jack Daniels?
Some sort of whiskey.
Okay.
I don't usually win my bracket pool, so we'll cross that bridge when I get there.
Connor's been able to shred his McLovin driver's license. And
it was just a flag.
Can legally do it. What are you picking?
I'll probably go some sort of whiskey route as well.
Okay, there we go. Give me that whiskey. You're a Chicago kid, so let's be honest. It's been a part of the food group on weekends since you've been 12.
No, he's a college guy. I thought he was going to say a 6-pack of those Buzz Balls, but you know what I'm talking about?
Come on.
Moving on.
That's like the most college drink ever. Those used to be all around.
Who do you think I am?
Biggest upset right now. I have Arkansas going all the way to the Final Four, and they're an 8 seed, so that's the lowest seed I have getting to the Final Four.
So you have Arkansas beating Kansas?
I do.
That's huge. Okay. I'll give you that.
I have also Charleston beating Virginia on the way to the Sweet 16.
I like that.
So I've got a 12 over 4.
My biggest upset, I have a 14 over 3 in the first round. I have UC Santa Barbara taking down Baylor. I don't know why.
It's just wishful thinking.
I'm not all that impressed with the Baylor Bears this year. Maybe that's just me. I've only watched one of their games.
They will flip the switch. It's all right.
Huge sample size.
Other than that, I also have 3 of the 4 13 seeds winning in the first round. I have Furman beating Virginia. I have Iona beating UConn. That's a bold pick, I know. And then I have Kent State beating Indiana. So we'll see how the 13 seeds fare this weekend.
I didn't realize you had that many winning in the first round.
I love the 13 seed.
With that being said, I also have a 13th seed winning. Iona, I think, beats UConn. That's my biggest risk, per se, in the bracket. I also have Charleston winning in the first round, and I have Drake beating Miami in the first round, so 2 12 seeds win.
Okay. No, I get it. There's a lot of heat on Drake, which is good. There's a lot of love for Pitino. I think he's shopping right now, so I think his players know he's shopping, and I think all this Iona love is out the window. I don't think they're going to play. They could do it. They're good enough to do it, but I just think that it will unravel. I think the Big Ten's going to have another tough tournament. Game to watch for me, if we get it, and this is not till the Elite Eight, but my game to watch is going to be Bama, Arizona. If we get that, selfishly Creighton, NC State, I think that could be a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And then also another game, Penn State. What Penn State team shows up? A&M got spanked this year because they whined last year as a 7 seed. So there we go. Does Bruce Pearl gouge somebody's eyes out? or does Fran stare a hole through somebody? Who has the bigger tantrum on the sideline between Iowa and Auburn? I'm excited for that.
My two favorite games to watch, first-round games, Michigan State and USC, 7 versus 10, and another 7 versus 10, Texas A&M, Penn State. Those are my ones to watch in the first round. In terms of the bracket as a whole, if Gonzaga and UCLA meet up, that's my game of the tournament.
That'll be awesome. Tournament
Give me your Final Fours.
Final Four, Arizona, K-State, Houston, Arkansas. Give me Houston over Arizona. Cougs win it in Houston.
I have Bama, Houston, Tennessee, and Gonzaga in the Final Four. I have the Zags taking down Tennessee in the championship game.
I have Bama, Texas, Kansas, and Marquette, and I have Alabama losing to Kansas in the championship.
Connor Clark going with Rock Chalk Jayhawk to the tune of a back-to-back. Talk to you tomorrow at 4 as we're on the road. Longwell's Rail Yard, come be with us.